Pain enough to find.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 5th, 2012 school board meeting. Just a couple of things. We are being videotaped. Our participation in government students will stop at 9 o'clock if we're still going, so you can sign out. And then I also want to let you know that we were in executive session discussing personnel and contractual matters. So we can start the meeting by rising for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we'll start with introductions. Lynn
Lenhart.
Kate Navarro.
Michael Cooper.
Jody Monroe.
Tom Douglas.
Diane Stever.
Matt Downey.
Laura Bierman.
Charmaine Singer.
Judy Kehoe.
Okay. And then any visitors on an agenda item? No. Okay. Is there approval of the minutes of the November 28th, 2012 regular Board of Education meeting? Is there a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. And Student Senate report, is Jamie here or Megan? Sometimes they'll come in a little bit later and then we'll go back to that item. And Superintendent's report. Tom?
Yes, thank you. Members of the Board of Education, faculty and staff, members of our community and students that are present tonight, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to speak in front of you, but it also is with a heavy heart in light of the most recent tragedies of a fellow school district in the Capital Region, that as we start our meeting tonight, we'd like to acknowledge that our heart and sympathies are with the students of Shenendehowa Central School District, as well as recognize the outstanding leadership here at Bethlehem to assist some of our students in this time of loss for the Capital Region as well as for Shen with the tragedy that happened over the past weekend. So I know the board has heard some comments from our community as well as I have just throughout the day from students that were able to attend. It's sort of an unusual situation, but given that the two districts are also very close competitively, the high school administration and I sat down at the request of some of our students, how could we assist in dealing with some of the issues of loss, especially among friends and not combatants, but in fine friendly competition from our interscholastic athletic programs, that we were able to reach out and work with the Shenendehowa community as well as with our counselors and the building administration. And we did provide some last-minute transportation for roughly about 2 bus loads of students that were connected in one way or another with this loss. So each of them thanks the district for taking care of that. And I would like to state from an email, it's sort of like, no, Gracie, I do not know why there's this, what there is with, there's no Santa Claus, but in this situation, it's hard for parents to let go of their most precious possessions of their children in times of loss of other children, and to travel that distance where in the evening you just don't want to let go. So we were able to do that, and I think the community responded, but I know most importantly our students responded with a heartfelt thank you for helping them with this situation. So our hearts and our prayers go out with the community of Shenendehowa at this time. On a lighter note, we celebrated at the last meeting Athlete of the Year commendation for one of our students, and since then we have actually on that night 2 more students at Bethlehem Central were recognized as Section 2 Athletes of the Year. Ethan Gunty from boys soccer is hoping to attend Stonehill College or Oneonta State to study sociology, and he was named that respective sports Athlete of the Year, as well as Mr. Nate Kane from boys volleyball. And Nate is hoping to attend RPI or the University of Rochester as well. So I know the board wishes both of those individuals well, and their congratulations, and we will be setting forth a letter for the students as well as their families, thanking them for representing Bethlehem Central so well. It's been a short time since our last Board of Education meeting, less than, I think, 7 days, and so at that point I'm going to conclude because I know one of the discussions still is the facilities discussions that will be upcoming. So thank you, everybody, and I hope everybody is able to join us for future meetings on this as well.
Okay, thank you. Board of Education report? I know we just met last week, so I'm all,
Well, we did do the cast.
oh, that's right. That was that, okay.
Yeah.
I just want to mention, had a Board of Directors meeting for NISBA this past weekend, and one of the presentations we had were from members of the Teachers Retirement System Board, and the reason I'm bringing it up here is that we're making the effort to try and have them calculate their increases annually on a less rigorous schedule, that they've gone from extremes of no increases to times that in 2014 they're planning on a 16% increase of the contribution. That's 85% of our budget is salaries, and well, approximately that for our teachers' salaries, and then 16% would go into the teachers' retirement system in that year, which puts a real damper on our budget. So we're looking at a way that they could even out, smooth out the increases so that there'd be, let's say, even a constant 8% every year. So in good years, they would probably get more, but then in bad years, then we wouldn't be facing those huge increases. And I have to admit that they weren't really too receptive. Their responsibility is to make sure that the retirement system stays solvent, and didn't seem to really be concerned with how districts are trying to cope with these massive, I would say massive increases in the contributions. This was even a chart. I know you can't see it from here, but just starting out higher many years ago, then going down really low, and then now going back up again. That with both tax caps and with the state aid caps, I mean, there's no place to squeeze sometimes anything out. So I just wanted to let you know that did take place. I think the Superintendent's Association is meeting with the retirement board too, and probably will attempt to try and do the same thing, convey to them how important it is to find some system going forward of smoothing out those increases.
Yeah, I do believe NISCUS is settled on within the next 2 weeks, I believe, meeting with TRS, and one of their positions is that we have to balance our budgets each year, and we have to make certain projections, and that we're looking at historically, if they would have had the projection somewhere around, I believe, 7 to 8.5% throughout every one of those years, we would not be in this state of uncertainty. So it's something for superintendents as well as our school district that going forward, no matter what, we need to learn from our past, and even in times of good year, we need to make sure we budget appropriately and reserve appropriately for the bad years. So.
That's it.
Anyone else? Okay, which brings us to our facilities project discussion. And I know that Dan, Hugh, and Pete are here. Greg is also here, so the board can ask questions. And I don't know, Tom, if you want to start with some of your,
Well,
how you want to...
one of the things that from the last meeting is the board decided that we will move forward with a bond. What's in that bond is still yet to be determined. But we have Ashley McGraw Architecture here, as well as Appel Osborne Landscape and Design Architecture, and our own Director of Facilities, Mr. Greg Nolte. So we have those individuals to respond to any questions of the board now that there's been at least a good week to hear from the first part with some concepts. One of the things that the board asked is that we tried to put up our high, medium, and low priorities, and please forgive me as I go through this. This will be on the website tomorrow, and there will be a building code that would match with the very first column. The board has this in both color and black and white there was a minor error, so I've updated this slide as well, so they may be working off of black and white. But if you notice, each item here has a priority level. There's a description of the item, and this matches basically what you've seen already, just now that we're starting to get into a little more specificity. We also have the probable 2014 hard costs. This was the big sort of price sticker shock last week. These costs are hard costs. They've always been presented as hard costs with a note on the bottom of every sheet that we put out that there would be potential soft costs as well. With the factor of escalation with this cost of 2014, we've done a priority listing so that you can see all the level 1 priorities or high priorities as indicated by our facilities and grounds. Then it would go to level 2 priorities and level 3 priorities. Each one of those priorities is also level cost and with a running total. And that's the orange column. And as we go down that orange column, you will get to a highlighted section when you see it, which is yellow. And that should also coordinate very symmetrically with level 1s and level 2s. So that should be the line. And for the cost for all level 1s identified, hard costs only is roughly around $11 million. And the last line is a running total, so you can always see where if you played sort of the rangefinder game and said, I want to do all the way down to the first 50% of the cost, you could tell what the total is. And that's what the board will have, and I believe the board asked for that. The second part is in the blue. Those are all the level 2 costs. The level 2 costs range about $3 million. And then the level 3 costs range to about, I think it's 1.1 million. Now, some of the level 3s are lower priorities overall on the overall scale. However, some of these also were discussed with the board on things that could potentially be in the budget or in our budget from year to year, and we should. Currently, they are not. There are some items in this list that are level 3 that our own in-house maintenance staff have already addressed. So although they were in the initial cost, they've also are being now pulled out of the cost. Unfortunately, it's not the highest total because our budget cannot support high totals of regular ongoing maintenance of this magnitude. Another reason is because we want to be careful that when we do this type of maintenance, we also receive appropriate state aid. When you do this type of maintenance in your year-to-year budget, you are not necessarily eligible for state aid, only up to $100,000 that would have to be within one specific building only. So that hopefully answers some of the questions on in budget and whether or not we should or should not try to address things in the budget. We should take a conscientious approach going forward in our budgets, no matter what we do with the bond issue, to try to start putting in items that are specifically year-to-year maintenance back into our budget and providing those resources as we plan. This list helps to get us to a new starting point and then continue forward from deferring in the past. In addition, the district, and I've just got to find the right file real quick. This PDF file is the school codes file, and this is, although the other document is not sorted by the hard cost work in each building, this file shows what are the potential costs in each building by building application for the list. Then additionally, the board has had some discussions on energy performance contracts. There is some debate right now that is happening between the district, our architect, and the company that also presented to the board, I believe on, was it October 18th? It was somewhere late October on energy performance contract. At that night, it was identified that there could potentially be $4 to $4.5 million that could be pulled out under an energy performance contract. Currently, with our architect has confirmed to us that at this point, it would be roughly 2.45. The major difference between 4.5 million and 2.5 million is roughly whether or not the roofing can be included. There is a long stretch that it could be, which would increase the amount of funds that could go towards energy performance contract. But before we can commit to that, to anything at the board level, we've asked for Greg, Dan, as well as ECG, and maybe even another energy performance company to confirm for the 19th whether or not. If they cannot confirm, this would be the only number that I would be willing to bring forth to the board to consider at this point, excluding the roofs, because we don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we promise too much. So that's something for the 19th. The next file is a potential timeline. The board had asked at the last meeting that a timeline be developed for nothing sooner than, I believe, an early March potential referendum vote. This timeline the board has is sort of an indication of that point, with the green representing the earliest date that referendum could be held, which I believe would be roughly around March 4th. That would mean that the board would have to come to a final resolution by January 16th. If the board wanted it on March, say, 11th, then the board could potentially have a special meeting, because that's 7 days, with an additional 7 days, or about January 23rd. So this just provides a rough time frame of the earliest that you could do with an early March referendum vote. Anytime after that, the calendar would have to be adjusted. And then the last is the overlay, which is going to be a little more difficult, but that's, now I at least know where it is. So that, I believe, is the information that the board had discussed, and we're trying to respond to that in the short turnaround window. But on top of it, one of the issues that the architects, as well as Greg and the administration, will need to know is, because there's so many different options that are out there, if the board could have some discussions, and we can answer any of your questions, and also further discussions on what we could potentially bring back as 1 or 2, or at the most 3 options for the 19th, so that we have sort of like a plan A, plan B, and plan C, or just a plan A and plan B to discuss, and then work off of those 2 plans to sort of narrow the field of any potential options. So I'll turn it over to the board, and I'll also turn it over. We have Dan Hucrath and Pete Osborne right behind Michelle Curtis, and any questions that we have and that we can answer, or the discussion that we can aid the board in.
Okay, go ahead, Matt.
One question I had was, in terms of how do you define a priority 1? Like, is it something that needs to be done within the next 6 months, year, whatever? Same with number 2, and same with 3. And then if there's any way you can tell us the consequences of not doing priority 1s, 2s, or 3s. I'd like that type of information too.
Most of the priority 1s were identified in the 5-year cap plan of items that should be done between the 1 and 3-year mark. Okay. I also looked, and again, I think with every item that maybe we want to talk about not doing, I don't think globally say this is going to be the consequence. I think you have to pick an item and we can talk about it.
Okay, I understand.
Because everyone, I mean, the roofs, if we don't repair a roof, I will continue to patch and to Band-Aid as much as we can. We might see an increase in certain contracted services for those types of repairs, because there's nothing that I can do to prolong that life, you know, any longer there. So, but that's pretty much the way, you know, I started looking at. We started with the priority 1s, and then I said 2s, and then 3s, and then within the 1s, I started ranking them even more for I guess, an overall priority. That's how we basically created that massive list.
I have questions on individual items, but I don't know if they're more global questions that the board wants to ask before we.
I think I would go with individual items first, and then go into broader. Go ahead.
When I developed my questions, I was working off the printout from yesterday, so it was this one. So, and I didn't have time to cross-reference my questions on some of these. So should we maybe go, I would suggest maybe building by building to see if maybe we do the high school, and then if people had questions about high school items, or?
We can't do that because ours aren't
They're
by
not
high
voted.
school.
Well, I know, but I can't do it because
I
I'm
would just-
by
so just
priority.
tell
I don't
Let's
think
go
it
there.
matters.
Okay.
I think
Oh,
just
at
ask
the
the
high
questions.
school. There was one about the D-wing terrazzo stair treads. I just want to clarify, that's not this terrazzo tile that's out there, that's something different.
No, these are the actual three staircases in D-wing that have terrazzo as part of it. That is the tread or the step on it.
We
saw them when we
Yep, I know, I just wanted to double check on it.
No.
Security camera systems, the cost, that's $106,000. Is that internal and external cameras?
Dan spoke at last week's meeting, and this continues to be a work in progress. We are continuing to refine numbers on a number of these. I know the board asked last time that for security cameras, we separate out exterior and interior cameras. I've met with the various administrators. We've come up with a scope that we feel would be suitable for exterior and interior. We provided that to Dan and then the engineering. They are working on that price. We don't have that price yet, but we will separate it out so forth and make the assessment. We should have that by the next board.
Okay, great. There's an item, it was 14 on the last list. It said field drainage improvements was $212,000. My question is, which field, and is that any way tied to any of the options?
No, that was in addition to the options.
Okay.
We just took a shot at it, so to speak, and that basically puts in some drain tiles around sidelines of most of the fields, and then goes in and does one of the things that we brought up before, the sand master, on only two of the fields, the field hockey field and the soccer.
Okay, so that's sort of separate from the football field track.
If I can make a suggestion, Dan, on our list, can you put sort of that note there as well, so it's a little clearer?
Yeah, because it is sort of
Okay.
thing.
Yeah,
I just-
anywhere where we can give a little more specificity, even though it makes the document longer.
And this is a smaller one, the sand and refinish gym A floor for $26,000 roughly. Is that for the whole floor or just for a section? And I thought the Booster Club for the basketball team had done that a few years back, but maybe a different gym. For the middle school.
We seal and coat. We had an in-house program that we would seal and coat our gyms, and with various budget reductions, we stopped doing that a couple of years ago. I want to say 2, if not 3 years ago. Okay, there's a point that you cannot seal. You need to basically sand, strip down, get down to bare wood, put your new lines on, and then reseal it. And A-Gym is at that point. There is some minor cupping in some boards, and this will create a more uniform finish on that.
Okay.
But I'm not aware of any booster donation like that.
That's the main, Gym A is the main gym?
No, Gym A is the first gym across from the
Okay, so I
auditorium.
was thinking, I thought it was a C, I was just
You
gonna.
would, Greg, would you also consider that something that should be regularly in our budget rotation from year to year, or not?
The ceiling, yes, especially for our competitive gyms. Sanding is, depends upon the use. You can get away every 6, 7, 8 years. We've never sanded in my 14 years that we've been here, so.
And I just have one more question on the high school. It was the last item, it was 31 on the old list. It said review improvements to emergency lighting power source battery system for $95,000. I wasn't sure, does that pay for just a review, or is there some type of repair? The way it's listed, and I think it's the same in the middle school, it's listed as a review, but I'm not sure what that is.
I'll try to speak to that.
Okay.
Our engineers have, in other school districts nearby, they've put in systems that are backup, emergency backup to the emergency lights. And instead of trying to tie things onto either uninterrupted power sources or a generator, these are more efficient, smaller units that run a lot better. They cover up all the emergency lighting you need. And it was something that they've done in the past at other districts and just wanted us to consider it to see if it made sense in our buildings. And it does look like it makes sense, we just need to investigate more.
Okay, but the review, the investigation cost 95,000 or the
No.
items?
No, the system proposal.
The system, you might want to just check the
Yep.
text on that,
Yeah.
because it looks like to look at something costs 95,000.
Yeah, so if we can clean that up as well.
Okay,
We
great.
have hundreds of emergency lights.
Okay.
Not thousands. And everyone has its own individual battery. And there's some new regs out as of a couple of years that require those lights to be on for an hour and a half when we have a power outage. They're expensive. The industry isn't making great lights. We're having a tremendous failure rate. So what Dan was talking about is instead of having batteries for every single one down this hallway or in the building, that we could potentially have one battery supply that will tie in all of these lights, which is going to be a much more efficient, cost-effective way because we are spending
Right.
a lot of
The
money
system
on
makes sense,
batteries.
right.
And we'll change
one other question, are there carbon monoxide detectors in this building?
Yes, I want to say about a year and a half ago, with some concerns that came out then, we actually have carbon monoxide in combustible areas, okay?
But-
Like in our boiler rooms, like in our kitchens, okay? We do not need carbon monoxide in, say, a classroom because we don't have combustible products in there. We heat our classrooms by hot water that is circulating. So the answer to your question is yes.
Yes, where needed, and in all the buildings, yes, where needed, or?
Yes, in each combustible area, in boiler rooms and in the kitchens.
Any other questions?
Those are just my questions for the high
Yeah,
school.
no, I know. I think what Tom, I think what we need to discuss, and I know that I want to see the options, but first of all, I mean, do we have the support to go forward with like the turf field?
Hang on
As
a
far
minute,
as-
Jane. She has questions on all the
Oh,
other buildings.
oh, I'm
too.
sorry.
That's okay.
I thought
She
you
stopped after the high
I
school.
just stopped at the high
Oh,
school.
okay. Okay, go ahead.
No, let her keep going.
Okay.
All right.
She's doing great. Well, okay.
And I don't by any means intend to micromanage, I just figured I gave him the list, so I'm gonna look at them. For the middle school, most of my questions had to deal with the pool improvements. And this is more for the board. Because I thought, a couple of years ago, we almost closed the
Something,
thing.
chopping.
Couple
So,
of years
yeah, a couple of years ago. And so I'm just rechecking with the board if there's a commitment to keep that facility open, only because there's a lot of money listed for upgrades. And I'm not saying one way or the other, I just said 2 years ago, we almost closed it.
Right.
I will say, last night I was in the middle school, and a lot of the gyms were being used for modified sports, and the pool was literally roiling with swimmers. I guess it's swim trials or something. There must have been 10 kids per lane. It was obviously being used. But before we invest this much in upgrades to that facility, I'm just asking the board, are we going to keep it open?
Well, right now, also, I don't know if all of them, but some of those items are on the EPC list too. So it,
A lot of them are.
yeah, so it pulls it out. At least it gives us it doesn't have to necessarily be in the full big bump if we decide. But I agree. When I saw those, I wondered that myself. If we're investing in something that we're going to end up closing in a year or two, is that wise? I don't know.
Greg, I'm trying to remember from the last budget season, the middle school pool was on there as well. What is the annual cost for, was it around 25?
About 25, 30,000 if you count lifeguards, chemicals.
I just couldn't remember, so.
But
the improvements are.
Right, the
Well,
improvements
and
are.
the improvements, will those reduce those costs?
Possibly.
Just possibly.
From the point of energy recovery, but not by much.
Not much.
Well, this brings it up more to code compliance. We don't, we'll have reduced, I would say, energy usage because we don't really have a great dehumidification system there. So we're exhausting this heated air instead of reusing it potentially to keep that area warm. So, you know, I don't know.
Okay. Judy, do you know offhand how much revenue that brings in? Because I know at one point when we were talking about closing, the Dolphins wanted to use it. And I don't know if that, I know that there was some issues about the rate.
I want to say it was around 10,000 for the middle school, but let me verify.
Do you keep track of it separate, like so that you can tell us
course.
exactly the middle school
Yes,
pool?
I just don't have it with me,
Yeah,
so.
no.
And then I also know, like, our physical education department really came out wanting to keep that as a station, and So I would support keeping that open at this point.
I agree that I think it's something that, it's an asset that we want to keep if we can, but I know in the past we've had some questions or concerns about the viability of it physically, how long it'll keep functioning. And if we can get some more information on that, I think that'll help to shape the discussion on those items. Because I would hate to sink in a lot of money only to find out that a year or two from now, we physically just can't keep it running, not as a budget item, but from a physical point of view.
Well, from a physical standpoint, I mean, the pool itself is solid, okay? What is proposed is how we condition that water and how we condition the air, okay? And as well, I think under priority 2, we put middle school pool finishes, which has to do with the lightings and then some of just the interior finishes of the deck. The tile is in good shape, especially in the pool. Some of the deck tile might need a little bit of work, but from a structure standpoint, the pool is solid.
I just eyeballed, I'm going to calculate, and it's about $650,000 worth of improvements. And as I said, I'm just raising it for the board. I'm not saying we should close it or keep it open, but just be mindful that we're sinking a lot of money into our facility.
I don't think anybody really wanted to close it at the time. I mean, it was just one of those items that was on the list that if we were desperate enough, we had to go to that level. But I don't think anybody was comfortable, and certainly knowing that it helps, every student to know how to swim before they leave the school district. I think it's certainly a life skill worth knowing, and having it as a phys ed station certainly is a very positive thing. Besides the use by the community, whether it's Dolphins or senior citizens, the town programs also use the pool.
That's what I feel. I'd want to know how many kids learn to swim based on it. If there's a substantial number of kids that learn how to swim, it's our responsibility to keep it open. Not everybody's a member of a country club or the town pool or things like that, and it's probably one of the most important things that we can learn in a very small amount of time. I don't feel any responsibility to the Dolphins or to the or anybody else, but I do to the students that go through here. Absolutely.
Well, the Dolphins were help supporting it, that's all.
Right.
With revenue. But you're right, and that was what the physical education teachers were saying, is that it's a life skill. And that's why they did not want to.
I realize that most of my other questions for the elementary schools is more just questioning, could something be done in-house? And I know the facilities committee is meeting tomorrow, and I'm on the committee, so I could ask them there. You want me to ask them now?
No.
I got a little bit. But one is for operations and maintenance, the purchase of grounds equipment. I just flagging for the board. It's only for $50,000, but I think that's something the board should consider in an operating budget. And for transportation, it's only $31,000. But what's a paint? It says install a paint booth.
Greg, you want to take that one? Because that's actually a current issue right now. Timing just precluded that we included into this, because we most likely are going to have to either address it through the bond and potentially get state aid on it, or potentially address it inside the budget and no aid. But it's a health and safety factor. Greg?
Basically, Al Karam is the expert on this, but part of DOT inspections for every bus is exterior, and we're not allowed to have certain areas of rust on our buses, so the buses still have plenty of life in them. So we either send those buses out to be repaired and painted, which, according to Al, he's not had great success. He's had to send buses back, and it is costly. So we have staff in-house that can do that body work for us and save ourselves a lot of money. Now, in order to do that work in-house, you have to have certain equipment, you have to have a certain room, because when you're painting, potential fumes could be explosive-proof. Outlets need to be a certain way, you need to contain, the staff needs to be trained in certain ways with respirators and all that type of stuff. So we're using one of the bays right now. It needs to be complied with a little bit more, some changes made to it. So that's actually why that line item is there. But as Douglas said, we might have to do it a little sooner. We actually are sending the buses out now, painting and stuff like that. Anyone's
in terms of the district-wide upgrades, I mentioned this in the last meeting, I'm sure you're working with the PTAs, but just to check those numbers on the playground and whether or not they actually need the 100,000. I think the Ellesmere PTA is actually meeting tonight with designers, but I know that the 100,000 amounts were put in there. I'm not sure that they actually need all that. And lastly, this is actually in technology. I don't know if anyone has any questions on buildings, but keep going. Okay. Is Sal there?
Yeah.
Okay, so network switch upgrades to Gig E district-wide 76 locations. Can you explain what that is? For me, it was item number 4 for $340,000.
So, read the English?
Yes, thank you.
Just, we do have a document on the website. Sometimes it's a little obscure, so some of these are described in layman's terms for the public as well. But the new standard, the standard a few years ago was something called 100 megabyte. That's the size of the pipe where information is transferred to. Now there's a requirement to have a larger pipe. The new standard is called gigabit Ethernet.
Okay.
And so we will be upgrading that pipe with the size of the way information is transferred to a larger pipe.
Okay, thank you. I get that. And lastly, number 9, the LCD projectors, just a flag for the board, and that some people in the community, because I went over those, the first 2 forums, some people were questioning the need for that. So, that's
The
it.
ones that go in the elementary school, right?
Yep. That's it. Thank you.
If I may, I've traveled around to every school giving some of the information. That if I can give you sort of the sense from the instructional staff, they view this as, and they've understood because they've seen some of it on the tapings for the board meetings, but they view this as one of their quintessential tools at this point because they have to, I mean, I believe, speaking for them, right now there's very limited access, and for the youngest kids, this is a motivational factor between this and the smart board that they can't get enough access because they're going off a cart or borrowing one. Am I saying that right, Al?
I can put it up. Like, as a teacher, to have those mounted is a huge time saving. Because when they're on the cart, the kids are walking into them. You got to recalibrate your smart board, and it just makes things go a lot easier and faster.
And I also, as we go through, I'll give you some of the viewpoints that have been shared with me because I told them I would do that with their anonymity, but also just to relay. But that was one of the big things that I heard from the elementaries.
Oh, I remembered one other item, and this is not on your list, but my kids went to Ellesmere, and I'm not sure if that front step was on the list, but as I recall, the front step to the main entrance of Ellesmere was all cracked up. I don't know if there are Ellesmere people.
Inside the school?
No, right outside. The front step as you walk, there's a single step up to the main door.
Sidewalk to the main landing before you get to the door.
Well, okay, who's here from Ellesmere? Okay. The Patty. Do you know what I'm talking about? So at the main entrance of Ellesmere, there's a single step before you hit what used to be a blue door. It was all cracked, but it's not on the list, so I just asked people to check that.
And again, I probably consider that an OM.
Okay.
Possibly so.
Great, thank you.
Greg will be there tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
A work order just created.
Well, I always thought that thing's going to fall apart one day. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nolte and the architects for answering the questions.
Diane, I have just one general question for them. I was just curious, Greg came up with this whole list, Greg and Sal and administration came up with this whole list of all the things that they thought needed to be done. And you went through the list and, inspected everything and figured it all out. Are there any items that you saw that you felt maybe didn't need to be done? Yep. I mean, I assume you evaluated what Greg and all were saying and
Right.
Gave your own opinion. I guess what I'm asking is, did you just take the list and see what it would cost to do what was proposed? Or did you evaluate what was there and say, no, we really don't need to do this. Instead, we could do that, or we should do something different?
We took the list, and as we walked through with Greg and his staff and crew, compared what someone else had written on a list and what we were seeing. And we were able to ask him questions, ask them questions as we walked through. Is this really what the item should be or shouldn't be.
Right.
And we do see, you know, at Glenmont or Ellesmere, we do see code issues with glass and corridors and things like that. So we brought those things to their attention. There's some things at middle school with accessibility that were definitely big issues. We wanted to make sure those were addressed too. So as we went through it, that was sort of our guide, a guide to look at things. But we wanted to look at how that one thing may impact all the things around it. So again, this is a work in progress. So as we're looking at the kitchen, like in the middle school, there's a lot of things that will impact and touch. And so we'll work with Paul Franchini and how those things go together. But we were looking at everything, basically. So I didn't think that there's any...
So you added but couldn't delete.
There were a couple additions, yes.
If anything, they added more than they...
That's what I was afraid of.
But that was our task.
Yeah. No, and that's what I would want you to evaluate on your own, to get another opinion on it, yes.
If I can remind the board, remember our first sheets, they had a lot of zeros on it? Those were items that came up outside of the BCS through either our walkthroughs with the various architect firms that we were interviewing before we selected Ashley McGraw, also from outside individuals, or even just as simple as like what you just mentioned, Charmaine, in regards to like that front stoop, things that a BCS might not catch, but we really need to address. I would say it would be hard to have somebody come in and not also trust the work of a former architect, but also not check and verify too. My personal feelings with talking to Greg is some of the items we could probably hold off on, but there's a potential loss for the holding off. Probably not the ones that are in the high priority, because those probably have a much shorter span that they need to be addressed versus the level 3s. If the district could find its way to do all of them, it puts the district in a stronger position with its physical plan. But you always have to, sooner or later, deal with a plan to maintain that over time. And remember, we may only be able to do certain parts and then plan for the next opportunity to do those, and also try to use advantage of some of our debt service to make sure that we're not increasing the taxpayers' load on that side down the road as well. So I think that is something that we should consider and look at between like the 19th and the 2nd as well.
I have a question on the handicap accessibility. You're saying that there are areas where we have not addressed them? Because it just seems in past bond issues we have, whether it was installing elevators, ramps, like in front of the middle school or in Ellesmere, whatever. It seems anytime we've done a project, I mean, obviously we're required to conform with ADA regulations. So are you saying there's some things we're still not in compliance with?
Yes, not everything is compliant, correct. There are facilities that are compliant, like the toilet rooms at the middle school, but they're in certain areas. What SED, the state ed department, wants you to do now, since ADA's been in law for almost 20 years, is whenever you're doing a capital project, you must address anything that's been grandfathered in. So you may have areas that have they've done the best they can without tearing the whole thing out and redoing it. But because it was grandfathered in and that area wasn't perhaps in a reconstruction, it was okay at the time. But now, as you look at any capital project, you will have to bring everything up to code that you can. So, yeah, there's a couple tight doorway areas that just aren't, they don't cut it. So.
The building is still accessible.
Yes.
Wow. Classroom bathrooms, Ellesmere, as an example. The bathrooms that are in those classrooms are not ADA compliant. I'm not sure if they have to be, but we actually modified one, I think it was 2 years ago. Okay, so according to the regs, any classroom bathroom would have to be ADA accessible. Okay, we're okay if there is a child that needs to get in there and isn't eligible. We have the ability within the building to bring the child there, but that classroom doesn't meet it, and we're grandfathered in.
at this point, as an example.
And can I ask, all those changes are included in the list? The ADA-related ones?
Yeah, I think if you look at the one Ellesmere where it talks about the bathrooms, the
Okay.
number's quite large.
Any other questions, Mike?
Well, I don't have a question, but I wanted to turn the discussion over to the actual bond and start framing the discussion on a possible approach. And I've done a lot of thinking about this, and I wanted to throw out a scenario to the board. We don't necessarily have to discuss it tonight. We might want to, listen to my idea and then discuss it at the next board meeting, but at least I wanted to get it out to you. I think all the items on the buildings are vital to the health and safety of our students, and we have to, as a school board, make sure that we protect our investment in these buildings. I can't speak for the rest of the board, but what's been striking to me through this whole process is that I haven't gotten any input from the community, either by email or in discussions, saying that the building items are not essential. I think there's been some discussion about whether, we should do a $5 million bond, a $10 million bond, a $15 million bond. I think we have to discuss that at some point. But all the comments that I've been getting are on the turf issue. And to me, where we're at now is that's the tail that's wagging the dog. And I think we need to step away from that. So I wanted to throw out a proposal on one way we could approach the bond. On the main bond, I would suggest, because I think we have to do something about the field, because the last 2 years have shown us with the rain we're getting with global warming and everything else, there's got to be some drainage work done on there. So my suggestion is the drainage, the repairs to the track be included in the main bond. That any turf proposal that we may consider, if we decide to proceed with that, be put up as a separate bond proposition. And I would like to, as long as we can legally do this, include language that says that if the turf proposal passes, but the main bond is voted down, that we will not proceed with the turf, that the main bond proposition would have to pass as well in order to proceed. To me, that's the only way we can stop all the focus on this turf issue to the detriment of the buildings, and really let the community vote on the 2 separate proposals so that one doesn't get tied up with the other. So that's my thought on how we could possibly approach this.
Mike, you said so that they don't get tied up together, but you really are tying them together. If one passes, say, the turf, and the other doesn't, you're saying that neither of them go. So you have tied them, so you got to choose one way or the other. Either they're together or they're separate, but then if the people speak, however they speak would have to work.
But my fear, Matt, is that if we don't separate it out, that we endanger the building bond proposition being voted down because of the turf issue. If we separate out the turf, then people can discuss that, can vote on them.
But I think that as a board, it's our responsibility to put forward what we think as a board is the best for the community, and then support that. And either personally, I would think you either support the turf field concept or you don't, And if you don't, then, you put up one proposal without the turf. Otherwise, you put forward a bond that would include the turf.
Laura? I just have a question. And I guess Tom would be the one, or Judy, to answer this. The way that Mike is proposing that, I believe the reason he's tying it is if the turf one were to pass and the other one went down, we couldn't get the 70% state aid, and we'd end up paying the entire cost of the turf field. And so I would totally agree, if they're separated, that we have to have that tied, that if only the turf passed and the other one didn't, that there's no way we'd want to go with the turf without the 70% aid helping it. So I would think that would be the reason for tying it if you're going to separate them. Is that right, Tom?
And Dan, just because you've done it, I do believe that Pittsford, the reason why I mentioned Pittsford, they're putting in 2 turf fields, and they've separated their proposition. But I do believe they have written it as a contingent proposition.
No, that's not my question. My question is, if the turf passed only,
yes,
we would not get 70% state aid on it, right?
I'm pretty sure, and that's why I believe that they did theirs as the way that they wrote theirs was, there's this $42 million for their main bond. They're like $8 million for 2 turf fields, and there's a clause on the second proposition of the turf fields that does, I believe, exactly what Mr. Cooper is talking about in regards to, if the main does not pass, they will not go forward with the second. And the reason being is they would have to fund $8 million 100%. In this situation, I believe that would be the same thing here, correct?
Yes. In order to generate aid on your site work, you need to do something in the building that's associated with. So you have to tie it to a minimum of $10,000 or more of work in the building, so it'd be the high school, to generate the aid for your site work. Now what happens now, this is a good question, because what happens is there's a 5-year, Judy, you'll have to help me. The wording is if you do capital work and you do your site work incidentals and you totally max it out, you won't be able to get that site work incidentals aided for another 5 years when they reset your aid for your incidentals. Yeah. So you may get in yourself into a trap where you have to plan out over 5 years what it is you're going to do for site work alone, because you don't want to run out of aid and then have to pay for it out of pocket. So it's a little tricky, but that's how the state ed department's doing it now.
Yeah, it would be something that would have to be researched by Judy as well with fiscal advisors. But I did not know that part of what Dan was stating, but that is oftentimes what others do. In essence, it does do exactly what Mr. Downey's saying, is it ties them no matter what. But the worst position I think the district would want to be in, if it did have separate propositions, is that the main bond would fail, the turf bond would potentially pass, and instead of only having to support on the local share the average of 30%, now the district would have to support 100% of the cost, and just taking the highest one, I think $4.5 million in soft costs, that would be a much different calculation. That would mean basically at this point, we can't even use the other analogy of 5% because that's based on an aid ratio. I mean, I can only think that would be almost a full, if that's 30% is $12 on 5 million, and you times that by 3, that's 36. It's going to be roughly about every home of 250, I would imagine, paying about $40 just for the field, period.
I just have a request that I am actually wearing my hearings this time, but I'm still for the home audience, but if people could come to the microphone, it's going to help me a bit more. I haven't decided, and I think it's going to be difficult for me to discuss much tonight, only because I'm looking at the numbers. My guiding principle is want versus need. I went and I did review the report outs of the first 2 forums, and people were at that time given $5, $10, or $15 million options. We had no idea what the new numbers would be. But having most of the community at the second forum, the first forum generated more questions than it did responses, but I do have the summaries of that. But in the second forum, most of the 9 small groups, including the 9th being the tech people online, were saying 10 million. And some people were saying maybe 15, depends what's in it, is going to be the amount of when the energy efficiency contracts items are taken out. So I want to know, I need more information on numbers. And not that I'm reluctant to discuss, but I want to know what the numbers are more in a more solid way. I understand your need to know what kind of options. It's wants versus needs, and also what the community told us in the forums and in the surveys. So that's my sort of guiding principle. Once we get to the, should it be a separate bond or a combined bond? I personally have a feeling one way or the other, but that feeling may change depending on what the numbers are. And again, what the community has told us up to this point. I would be concerned that it's a combined bond in general may bring down the entire thing. Plus, the community in the second forum basically told us, with the exception of one group, said separate them out. So if we invited community comment, we as a board have to do our best judgment for what's best for the community and the students and all the rest. We have to juggle that. But if we invited the community to respond, and then I think we have to take that into account. We don't necessarily have to do exactly what the community said, but if we invited comment and then we say, well, thanks very much, but we're going to do this, I think that's disingenuous. So,
300 people commented and 6,000 people will vote. So it's not a good statistic.
Sure. But at the last meeting, you asked the communities, you said let the community decide, and I think if you want the community really to decide, I think we should split it. My other issue is, as much as we're asking Mr. Nolte to think about his operating budget, I've said this since September after the first forum, and I've repeated it a number of times, I am looking to think of ways that the board could support the athletic program in general in the general budget. And I know that you've come up with some field. So it's not, for me, the field isn't the only way we support athletics. Again, I'm still open to what the rest of the board thinks, but there are other ways of supporting athletics. I do believe some kind of drainage needs to be done. And I know that I asked, I'm not sure we have it tonight, there, when we were interviewing architects, as much as they were showing photographs of what the field would look like with the artificial turf, there was a photograph that showed what the drains would look like. So I would like to see that at some, not necessarily that one, but there is one that showed the football field with the installation of drains. So it's towards the
Scroll
end.
down. I've got to find the
Yeah.
scroll
I don't
button.
necessarily need to see it now, but I think as we discuss the turf field, there is a slide that shows what the field would look like with the installation of drains. And it's not just showing the green grass, it shows what the drains would look like.
Just let me shrink it down a little. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, but there's more on the left one side. Just
Oh,
scroll
okay.
left.
Sorry.
There you go. Couple different outfits.
I think, go ahead, Lynn.
I was saying this, some people have come up to me about the turf field, and, whether it should be artificial or whatever, and I know there are probably a lot of people in the community who say, well, it's there, then we're just going to vote no. But then there are those in the community that'll vote no matter what, even for the improvements too. But what's not clear in my mind still is the high school is, and I wasn't here then, but it was built in a swamp. I mean, that's what people who lived here at the time said. The high school was built on a swamp. And so the issue of soil has always been an issue with fields and whatever. And I know we don't have a total history of all the work that's been done on fields, but it seems like drainage perennially is an issue. And I guess in my mind, I need to know whether, if we just we have to do something with the field anyhow. If we just continue to do it as a natural field, whether we're still going to continue to have the drainage issues, and whether this really will resolve all of them, or are we better off going to the artificial that in the long run, will save us money because we won't be paying out all that money on an annual basis for drainage issues. And that's what's not totally clear to me. I mean, that's what's going through my mind, and that's what I've said to people when they've asked me about it. But I need to know that clearly, before making that, final decision on it. And I think that's really be helpful for the community too, because I think sometimes if you see it laid out that it would be beneficial, especially financially, going into the future, then I think people might be more willing to make that investment.
Well, maybe this would be a good time to maybe look at essentially what Pete is proposing. Within that number that we first talked about, field drainage improvements, we have had coaches with the conversations with the athletic director, with my grounds guys, as far as where are problem areas of the fields. And although some of the fields themselves, and we're working on that regarding the quality and the data that we've talked about of each field, okay? But the water drains off the field, where does it go? So we have these common areas of these swales that aren't getting the water from that point to the ravine or to our drainage areas. So it's kind of a combination of two factors here that we want to correct, all right? And I'm not sure if we talk about how, one of the slides is the actual drainage improvements that we would do to the track field, okay?
Potentially, there's probably, I'm showing maybe 4 options.
Pete, if you could, just because it's,
If you go back to the drainage.
you can actually use that computer right there,
Okay.
and then I just leave the mouse alone.
I'm going to shrink this up a little bit. And I can move it back out if people want to see it better. I'm showing the sand injection method, which is the left-hand column. And it shows the machine doing the work, and then it shows somebody cutting a section out of a field so you can see how the sand is actually injected into the soil. And then the next one is the vertical drains, which are actual drain tiles that are put in about a 2-inch wide or 3-inch wide trench that's cut, and then the material that's removed is removed out, and sand is put in around this thing all the way to the surface. So it's a little bigger version of the sand injection. But they're usually put in, as you can see on the tractor down there, those things are about 10 inches apart. These things, the ones in the middle would probably be anywhere from 20 to 10 feet apart. And then the sand banding over there actually is a combination of the two, where you do the vertical drains in one direction, usually across the field, from the crown to the sideline, and then again on the other side from the crown to the sideline. Because you want to use gravity to drain, and you have a crown, so it's going to flow downhill. And then you do the sand banding on the length of the field over top of these things. So the theory, the idea here is that water doesn't have to travel on the surface too far before it drops into either the sand injection method, which eventually gets into some kind of a drain tile, whether it's on the sidelines or it's all the way through the field, like the sand banding method. Or the vertical drains, where it goes across maybe 20 feet and then drops into a vertical drain. So these are methods to take an existing field without amending the top of it too much, and cutting in drain tiles and drainage, injecting well-draining material in there, so that during a rain event, you want the rain to sheet off, that doesn't get absorbed by the soils. And you have really tight soils here. They're really fine sands and silts with a little bit of clay. So they're not going to drain really well. They'll only take so much water, and then it's going to either pond up on it, and it needs to sheet off. This would take it and put it subsurface, and then eventually find a drain.
and take it off. So in that number that I had, the big part of the number was really putting in bigger drain tiles on the sidelines of some of these fields, setting up the precedent to come back and do some of these on more of your fields, but we would do these on 2 of the fields. Okay?
Pete, just because I've never seen the sand injection method,
Yeah.
I'm just looking at that just from my common layman's terms. Wouldn't it over time, the use push that together and cut off some of the routes?
No, what happens is you inject a well-draining sand in there, and then honestly, the field for, when you're done looks like a mess. But within a month, it actually, because part of the process is to overseed it too. But within a month, if it's watered well, you wouldn't even notice almost. And then that sand basically stays in place over time, and the grass grows right over top of it. So if you wanted to, you could come back and do this in the opposite direction. And so you could, over time, inject all this sand into your field and open up the drainage and almost make a well-draining sand field. That's what some people do. But initially, we've used these on a number of fields that weren't draining really well. As long as we had drain system in place that it could travel to, it works really well. In fact, we did it at Clyde Savannah, and we were going to do it in 2 directions. And it worked so well, they decided to take a credit for the other direction.
I just have a question about the vertical drain method. Those drains that you're putting in, are they on the actual playing field, or they're all on the sidelines?
If you can, I don't have a pointer here. Let's see.
This is the drain right here.
Yeah.
So this drain tile that you see on the bottom picture is only that squiggly piece at the bottom of that trench. The rest of it's filled with sand all the way to the top.
In the vertical drain method?
Yes.
So what's at the surface on the ground?
Sand.
And that's what you put the grass over?
Yeah, you overseed it, and the grass will grow right through it.
So there's no actual drains out on the grass or something?
No, it'd be like a French drain of sand, or a vertical chimney of sand with a drain tile at the bottom.
So no one's going to fall in a pipe, is that what you're saying?
Well, or catch cleats or something
Trip over it.
in drains or something. Yeah.
No, we did this to East Syracuse Minoa's field before they put their turf in. It helped the drainage on there. We did this at Seneca Falls on a number of their fields. We did this a couple, I don't know if it was last summer or the summer before, to Clyde Savannah School District, and a couple others that I know we've done, but I can't remember the names of them.
Do they have the same kind of soil that we have out here? Because all we kept hearing is all the clay soil.
Actually, they probably had in some instances worse soil.
They're both built over swamps.
Yeah.
And they are working there, and how long ago was that?
I think the last couple ones were done either this past summer or the summer before.
Okay, so still pretty recent.
Yeah.
Have you had any failures?
No.
After
but honestly, they haven't been in that long either. So, I mean, anything you put in, even if you do a French drain, over time, you'll get, especially with maintenance on the field, everybody's got to understand that a grass field is a living system. So you have maintenance on top of there. So if you come in and you top dress with a material that's going to seal that off, then it's not going to work. So part of the maintenance, and that would be in our report, that you need to top dress with a certain type of material to keep that drainage system open on a continual basis. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the 3 methods that you have here are improving the actual play fields. Okay? What we've also talked about is these common areas or these swales that are between a lot of the fields that we've either had the tiles collapse or that aren't draining right.
Yeah.
And maybe you can speak to that on the over.
Yeah, I don't have a picture of that, but it would be, instead of being a flat pipe like that, it would be a larger round pipe, and we would cut those into the swales, and that is in that number that you were asking about.
You
you have the first slide there, the overall.
So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
so Greg, are you saying we did one of these methods already in the fields and they didn't work?
No.
Oh, good.
Can you go to the aerial view?
On the area view?
No, I know. I thought he was saying that already.
The first one.
Go all the way up to the top.
That's just a large. Okay, so, my mouse doesn't work. Oh, there it is. Okay. It doesn't show up. I don't have a, no, it's, all right. Bear with me. Okay. One more. Okay. So, if everybody can see my cursor at the bottom of the page, this is Delaware Avenue. Okay, we have field hockey here and here. All right, there's a swale that goes along the perimeter of the fields here. And there's like a basin about right here. And pretty much all along the access road along here, going to the ravine, along these fields is a big state storm line, okay? Many years ago, and we talked about this as we tried to look at the history of the work that was done, but drain tiles were put in pretty much in between these fields. You see the field hockey and the practice PE fields. There's a swale here, or a ditch, okay? And within that ditch, there's tiles, and we believe that there is a pipe that kind of goes along here and then goes into potentially the state system, okay? Up here, the top of the practice football field, there's a swale that kind of comes along here and then along, and as well we think goes in. And we think that those don't drain great. Those I think have been on in forever. And those are some of the improvements that we've talked about.
So you're saying they have to be replaced, like the things that are in there now?
I think some of them actually do because they're a corrugated metal pipe, and you've been having sinkholes, which is an indication that the banding between those is failing and the soil is washing in there and compromising them.
So is that on the main list then, or is that on the options?
Yeah, we talked about, the main list was field drainage improvements.
That's the,
So,
that's the swale.
as Pete mentioned, we can sheet drain, from the surface. Water can drain off the field and then into these swales. That's one way. Or it can drain into the field and then into these pipes that are underneath and then connect potentially into this underground system.
In order to drain effectively, you need a slope of a 1.5% minimum from, say, the crown of the field to the sidelines. A lot of your fields don't have that, so amending it with some of this drainage things would help improve that.
Pete, does our main competition field have a crown? Because I recall
That's
it
one
did
of
at
the,
one time, and then they widened it or something.
Yeah, I believe you had a crown, but then you had ditches with drainage structures around, and then it went back up to the track, and those were filled in, and then you had the trench drain around the track. But in my opinion, you don't have a significant crown on that field, so it's not going to drain like it should.
Will that make what you were talking about harder to do it? Because are you saying you'd have to put a new crown on the field as well? Or?
Well, there's multiple options. It all depends on A, what's your expectation, and B, how much money do you want to spend to get that expectation. But the first slide, at the bottom of this thing, I have the ultimate option, which is to renovate the field, which is really remove the topsoil, stockpile it someplace, reshape the subgrade, cut in drain tiles where we need to, and then amend the topsoil because it's a very tight topsoil. So if we can get some amendments in there to open it up, screen it and put it back, probably raise it up enough to get a minimum crown on it so it drains. And then I think in that number,
is that
the natural turf,
$1.6 million number?
Yeah, that's a total renovation number. And that would include a subsurface irrigation system like you have on the two soccer fields near the O&M building. And that would basically give you a brand-new grass field that has the proper crown, has an amended soil that allows it to drain better, and has some drainage underneath the field where it needs to. So that was, that's at the bottom. I had those options, and then this was the ultimate option. To completely redo the grass field.
So which is included in the ultimate option is in the 1.6?
Yes.
But I have a question on how, because I'm not sure if I understood what Mike was proposing, and I'm not sure if we could do it this way. Because I thought, what I heard you saying was include this type of thing in the main bond and a separate bond for the turf field. But what happens if they both pass? Then do we take the cost of this out? The cost of the field improvements would come out.
That,
right?
I will tell you,
How does that work?
no. That would be something that would be, please forgive me, their nightmare to figure out.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because, in essence, if we did something like that and put this into the main field, they would have to take whatever option for the turf, and then, because we'd no longer be doing that, they would have to change the cost structure of that second proposal, because if that passed and this passed, we would no longer do this, but this money would be absorbed to make sure that that second proposition becomes a reality.
I was just wondering if it was even possible.
Yeah, let me use a hypothetical number. Say, and I'm only using $5 million just because it's an easy number. Say this costs $2 million, but a turf field cost $5 million, and this costs $2 million, and you put it into the main bond. Now, that turf field over to the side, you might end up, if both of them passed, you might take this $2 million and take off that $2 million off of that. So in essence, we'd be putting up a turf field at a much lower cost, because part of that drainage would also come out of here. Is that right, Dan, roughly?
Yeah.
You're just swapping it off, but you've got to be careful to do it so that you don't miss something.
Right, you don't want to have a gap or double up or overlap.
Yeah. I would say I would be cautious of that with the community, just because of the fact it looks, now that I just said it, it looks like we're lowering the cost of one thing because we're adding it to something else. And the one thing I'm proud of, the community said we've been open and honest. We want to make sure that we continue that trend and we don't all of a sudden say, oh, are we trying to, I know we're not trying to, but could the perception be there? Oh, see, it was $5 million, but they said it's only $3 million because they confiscated $2 million out of this, even though that was the intent.
Well,
Things
what
gonna
we
take
can
full
say to the
explanation.
community
Yeah.
is that we want to ensure that
Right.
we make some sort of improvements to these fields. And by structuring it this way, no matter how the vote goes, hopefully we will see some sort of substantive improvement.
Okay, and but I think what I would like to kind of accomplish tonight, if we could, I mean, are people willing to consider the turf field? I mean, just because if we are, then I'd like to maybe narrow down some of those options and have them discuss the options of the A, B, C, D. If we could just kind of maybe look at that. So, I mean, is there interest to?
Can I just make one other comment before we get to the turf field? Because trying to look at the list of all the other, main issues that we're talking about, and as far as how we're going to kind of decide what we want to do, there's two things. One is I don't quite understand how we do that EPC. I mean, if we decide we're going with those, do they get totally removed out of the bond items, so then this running total can be reduced by that much? Because I think that would help us a lot. Because I think what we're going to end up having to do is unfortunately work backwards and say how much are we going to want to spend, and then kind of this is where we can go on the list. And so it would be helpful if we knew if we could take off the EPC items, then we know we can get farther on the list. So I guess that's important. The other thing, otherwise, I don't know that we really can be saying on this list, oh yeah, we should do this, we should do that, shouldn't do that, or something like that. I think we have to trust what they've come up with or what Greg and the administration has come up with as far as a priority
Right, and that's
of
why-
these items and let them go down the list.
Right, and they're
That-
doing the facilities committee tomorrow. I don't know if you're on that committee.
Well, I
still.
was on the committee, but I didn't know there's a meeting tomorrow,
Yeah,
so.
6:30, I thought you were on the committee.
What it was is
Oh,
the
okay.
committee
Away.
switched at the architect.
I missed the September
Yeah.
meeting, so did I get thrown off the committee?
6:30 tomorrow, so.
I know
It's
because I was
6:30.
at the architect, maybe Cindy just got my name on it.
Yeah, I think
Well,
that's what.
Anyway, so I think in our case, it's going to be more the dollar figure and how much we can go down on the priority list. That being said, I do have to mention that I am very strongly opposed to any internal security cameras in any of our buildings, and I will totally vote against anything that includes inside security cameras. I don't have a problem with the outside ones, but I will not support inside security cameras in our buildings. So that's why it's important to me to get those separated, and I will not support that. So otherwise, I don't think there's really, and that's what I guess from the board we have to decide, are there things on the list that we feel qualified? I don't otherwise.
Right. You're right.
As to what is on the list and what's not, I think it's more of a dollar figure. So I don't know if that helps or not, but.
If I can suggest something from what I heard. And I'm going by working backwards, but in a way we're working forwards to end up getting to work backwards. If the architects can bring to the board on December 19th, no matter what the costs are right now, because that's what I mean by working forwards, 2 concepts that the board wishes to consider, and doesn't mean you're stuck with them, but sort of like what Mike said, whether it's just drainage or whether it's including of synthetic fields, what synthetic field would be the option, just because of the fact that way now, say you have 2 maximum amounts, then we start working backwards with the EPC, because in each of those plans, say hypothetically, it would include everything, just the only difference is the 2 athletic plans. And then we have 2 totals, and then we can start to say, okay, on both of these, we can back out the EPCs. Here's the new totals. Then it's, here's our priority list. Where does the board have its comfort level? The reason why I'm looking for that is because now I can focus both of the architects in to get more finite information. And on the next platform, we will have, because I know we just have too much of a short turnaround time to separate it, the separation of internal and external security cameras. The decision, however, and with all due respect, Laura, has to go to the whole board on how they do it. But at least that's a discussion item that will have to be on the 19th as well to give us direction to move forward. But from the 19th, what I would hope is that at least at the 19th, we have 2 options. We know the framework and potential cost so that we can prepare those options better for the second, so that now you have the 2 options, and then ultimately the board would say, we are going with this option or we're going with this option. Then really what's left is finalizing the number and how you present it to the community. But if you can get to, like, I think on your packets, there's like 5 options. Each option of the fields I think we have up here tonight, correct, Pete? Each one of those sort of shows the differences, and either Greg or I or Pete should be able to explain some of the differences there on which one. Knowing that, I mean, the easy way out is we could take the maximum cost and this, because no matter what, if we whittled that option down, it automatically reduces the cost. But I'd rather have the board have that discussion so that we know, okay, we're going to use option A, we're going to use option 3, or we're going to use option 1 and 4. But that way we can come back and then now convert it to option A, option B, and that's all we're working.
I have a question, because of these 5 options, I thought there was an option where there was to put a synthetic turf down on the football field and maintain a 6-lane track. Has that been taken off the table? Because it looks like everything with a synthetic turf has 8-lane track on it. That's option. It says 8 lanes on the handout.
Can we just double check on that? Because I thought all of them actually went from 6-lane up to 8-lane, even if we maintained the natural turf, that it would went to 8-lane, yes or no?
No, this is, I
Okay.
think last meeting was if synthetic turf plus 6, and here it says
Yeah,
synthetic turf.
and this is some of the process that you lose the numbers as you go through.
So option 1 is synthetic turf, but 6 lanes.
No, what is
Is
the main?
Grass.
Okay.
Option 1 is the existing 6-lane track with a grass field.
Yes.
Option 2 is a same configuration track you have, just adding some more lanes and putting an artificial turn. There is no option for this, keeping your 6-lane and putting the turf in.
Except the drainage option, so that, keeping the field was a 6-lane option, currently as a natural surface.
So you're saying if we go with an artificial turf, we go to an 8-lane track?
In this,
In these options.
every option.
Yes.
In every option.
I mean, you could have an option 2A, and it's 6-lane existing, artificial turf.
Yeah. I mean, with the 8-lane, that's a maximum, that's probably one of the maximum costs. That could be a discussion that would change, so. These were just the options that we were presented with, that we presented.
Okay.
So can we go through, let the board finish discussing, all right?
There's no public comment.
Which, do all the synthetics, other than number 2, the existing, do they, the 225 by 360, would that accommodate every type of athletic event?
Yes.
Field hockey, soccer,
Which
football?
option is that?
Option
3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, option 3 is up here. I believe from the last meeting, the only issue with this option for all-inclusive is just right in these corner areas for corner kicks for soccer, correct? Option 4 addresses that issue, correct?
Correct.
And that's why this is called a broken back track, and it gives just more area so that the cleats are not on the track surface. Option 5, where's option 5? Option 5, we don't have a picture, but I think when you presented that, that was putting synthetic on the current soccer field and then doing the improvements to the existing competition field, so you kind of had the best of both worlds. That's sort of pie in the sky. There could be some extra costs there. There's no team rooms, bathrooms, water, but that was one of the things that the board had asked for creative thinking during that.
Well, I think we could take that one off.
Yeah, if there's no facilities.
So 5, off the
That's
table.
only 5 off.
If there's no facilities with it.
Okay?
I don't think-
And then,
We've done 20% of our work right now. That's great.
I would like option 1 considered. That's not the turf one, but that's.
option 1 is just the drainage, right?
So
And
option
then-
1,
For me, if we're gonna put the turf in, I'd like to see be for all sports. So option 2 wouldn't be able to be for all sports?
option 2, let's be clear. Option 2 can, Pete, help me out here. It can be for all sports. However, not all sports will like the dimensions of
Okay,
the
well
field.
then, to me, that's not an option.
It's a narrow soccer.
It's a narrow soccer field, and I think lacrosse field and field hockey fits okay?
Well, but would it be sectional playable, I guess, is the question, because that's what we've talked about.
It
Being
probably
both
would be
sections.
less desirable if it's under the regulation size for any court. Even like if you do basketball, they'd rather have a 92-foot court instead of the 82s that are out there.
So I would like that one off the table.
How's everybody?
Is that-
I want it to be accommodating to all sports if we decide to go that route.
Okay, so the only ones that are left are 3
I
and
actually
4.
like that option. I would like to keep it on the table. Now, if that means we can't take something else, I think at this point, if a board member says, I'd like to hear more about that option, we're not deciding anything
No,
tonight.
we're not.
So I would like to hear more about that option.
I guess I would go with 1, 2, and 3. I know you want it down to 2, but I don't know that I can do that.
I'm wishful thinking.
Well, but the broken back, that gives them bigger corner kicks, right?
Right. So you're not
Or-
moving the
So they're
track.
not on the track.
So they're not
For
moving
another
the track.
$500,000.
Well, yeah,
Are there any
explain
other,
the-
Which
yeah.
would
if we
be-
can ask Pete, are there any other advantageous? Yep.
The one thing does, it may be perceived as not so desirable for football is football
Can you
field.
speak up?
Sorry.
The one thing you need to know is that the football field is really further away from the stands when you do this. So, that, I mean, whether that's a negative or not, it's just a reality.
Just because you've got to widen the field. So
Yeah, well, if you
practice.
compare this one and where the bleachers are with that one in the field, it's probably another 30 feet.
And was there concern that the track folks wouldn't like it because the track is different, or?
Well, you always want to, I mean, you're making an investment on the track. The track is one of your heavily used areas by the community as well. When you get cleats, depending on which type of footwear somebody uses, if they're out on that, we may, I know from talking to you in the past, some have had turf areas that they lay down so that they're not affecting the track.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but
Didn't somebody say that the track and field folks don't like the broken back?
I don't know.
The
That's known as like an international track.
right.
It could, I'm just thinking back when we had, and I don't think it was yours, but when we were looking at pictures, somebody had actually taken one of the tennis courts out to make more room. Is that off the table completely? Or?
Well, that was just those individuals resituating the track. I don't recall whether it was a broken back track or not. And what Ms. Stevers is saying is this tennis court was lost in that.
Just one.
And what they did is they put in a tennis practice wall there, and the field, I think the field shifted along this route,
Yes.
sort of
It
the
did.
same
And
way.
it came closer to the admission gate, or the entrance gate.
I think
Yes.
it was the broken back, I think it was that.
But I think it was a broken
straight,
back just
but it was
over
straight.
farther, yes.
Yeah, but we were able to fit it in without interrupting
doing
the
that.
tennis
Yeah.
courts, which, you know, if we cascade into other things, it's just more cost. We try to, keep things neat if possible.
It's difficult for me to really visualize what these things are gonna look like, but I have to admit, when I first saw that, I thought monstrosity. I'm a little concerned of something that big going into that space, and then having it in there, and then looking at the aesthetics of the school, and I just hope we didn't have any kind of remorse of, like, oh my gosh, it just doesn't look.
Yeah, I think last time I had an actual picture of one. It was on the previous.
I can put it up off of the thing if you want.
But, I mean, you kind of really need to go and see one to see what it really looks like.
Well, I mean,
And I-
seeing what it looks like in our space,
Yeah.
given the amount of space there, that's what I mean. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a big thing, but how would that look right off of whatever that street is, right by the high school? That was my concern. I don't know what it's gonna look like, but I have to admit, I thought that's an awful big facility, given the space we have.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Usually, when driving by them, you don't really get the sense of the total depth of them, but I could be wrong there. That's one that's pretty comparable to your current configuration.
And that's a broken back track?
No,
I was
no,
gonna say,
no.
the broken back one.
That would be like your existing track with a turf
Right,
inside
right.
of
The
it.
broken back one was, I was concerned about the size.
And the next slide should be the broken back.
And Lynn, I think you were asking something about the cost over 20 years. I remember we had that last time too. I don't know if that was part of what you were asking
Well, that's what I'm
earlier.
Long term.
Long term, right?
I don't know what might happen to those drainage systems over time, but whether you need to do that every few years, especially if soil conditions are so you're really investing a lot. Every few years.
I can't say that you won't need to do that, maybe 15, 20 years down the road. I can't really say that. You might have to. Just to give you, for instance, I did a professional baseball field where we actually took out a turf and put in a sand-based grass field. But the longevity of that field, based on the soils expert I hired to help me on the thing, he says 10 years and you might need to redo some stuff on that. And that was a really well-draining field. So I can't say that you wouldn't have to do additional work, 10, 15, 20 years down the road.
But you have to do that with the turf, too.
Resurface it.
Yeah, you would have to resurface the turf. Within the 20-year period, you would put a new carpet on.
What would help me decide right now with the options is to really hear from our athletic director, and John's not here tonight, and our coaches and phys ed teachers to see, what works best for them. And that would be very beneficial to.
John unfortunately had a family emergency and had to go out of state today, so otherwise he would have been.
Because I can look at these and I'm clueless.
Well, we did hear, I think Charmaine was correct, that or Tom or somebody, that the track and field people did say they don't like the broken back track.
Well, I don't know if they said that, I just
No,
know
they
someone
haven't
said
I never heard that.
said that to us.
That's
Yeah.
what
They
they
had
said.
mentioned, they had mentioned through some discussions that we've had, either with the architects and so forth, that those are possibilities. But I agree that those were some of the concerns that we need to make sure.
And if there was something that you can, like looking at option 3, on those corners, if there's some, I want to say carpeting or whatever, that you could put down to protect them from the cleats, in the case of a soccer game.
Yeah.
I mean, to have it just that much bigger, just so that we're not hurting the track. It seems like there should be some other solution.
And if I can, a lot of places will do where they can attach a stitch member of the, sort of the rough carpet, so that that's just the protective without trip hazards, or not?
They basically use it.
Okay.
Very few districts have the international field. Most of them have the widest field they can get for soccer, whatever fits within their thing. So it'd be option 3 is what most people would do, and they just deal with the corner kids.
Okay.
You probably have maybe 20 or less broken back tracks at high school in the state.
I do have a question back to option 5. I mean, it seems so much more expensive, but, I mean, with the other options, you're going to have some deconstruction costs. So I guess what makes number 5 so much more expensive when you've got an open area to do the work?
Well, it includes infrastructure that's not there now.
Like lights, bleachers, power.
Oh, so it did include lights. I was thinking it didn't include.
Yeah, I believe that. Plus, I think it also included. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dan. Did it also include renovating the
Yes.
turf field? So that was all
That's
part
in
of it.
there.
Yes.
So that was
They're
all
really
part of
doing
it.
two fields.
So you essentially were doing a artificial turf at the soccer field and redoing your.
Okay, doing the drainage, so the. Okay.
But you don't really have all the infrastructure there at that site that you do at this site, really.
Anybody else? Kate?
I like option 3.
Option
It
3?
includes all it includes all the sports. I think you need an 8-lane track. I don't know that it's worth $450,000 for corner kicks on there, honestly. My other comments would be, I don't agree with separating the bonds. I think it's going to split the community. I think that's a bad thing. I think the whole purpose of redoing the field is to bring the community together. I think people are already splitting academics versus sports, and I don't think they're exclusive. So I think you need to bring the community together on that. I also think splitting it is a bad message to the students. I think it's showing them that we feel the other things in the school are important, but sports is fluff, and I totally disagree with that, which everyone knows. But I think that's the message you're sending. We don't split votes on anything else. We don't say, should language stay, should this stay, should whatever stay. We say, here's what we're putting in front of you, and here's what you do. And I think this is just as essential as everything else that we're talking about, personally.
I would agree with Kate's sentiment that if we do go forward with a synthetic field, that we should be presenting to the community what is in the best interest of the district, and either we support it proposing a synthetic field and let the district, the residents decide or not. And I think if you're going to create animosity out there, you're going to have the people who favor the field or who don't, and then, the worst case scenario being that the field passes and the other doesn't, and then you don't do anything. And, you've created a terrible situation in the community. So I would support one proposal and let the community speak to that.
I don't really think, and I don't know if you think that, I don't think there's any way the field would pass without the rest of the bond. I honestly don't.
I don't think so either, but
And the
it's
reason
a possibility.
being is, I think people are spending all their time talking on the sports stuff because I think people don't want to pay for it, but they know that the other stuff's essential. And, most people are upset with obviously having to pay for it because nobody wants to. And a lot of people thought the $93 million bond should have covered a lot of this. And I just moved in May when it went up, so I honestly don't know anything personally about looking through the bond, but a lot of people are very skeptical that you said you were going to do it and you didn't do it. So, but I think when it comes down to it, people are going to vote for what's essential. It'd be shocking to me if the, quote, sports people, which is what everybody's saying, are still for the school. Those people are going to keep your school going. You can't keep your athletic program without having a good school. So I don't think those are mutually exclusive. I really don't. I guess you have to cover your bases and put in some kind of contingencies and stuff, but I've never heard any of the sports people saying anything negative about the rest of the stuff that's on here. I haven't at all.
I think your question was how many options. I think 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Is what I'm
And
hearing people.
if I could speak on this to maybe give a little clarity. Between option 2 and option 3, there's a difference of $900,000. If I brought back to the board option 1 and option 3, it doesn't mean that you couldn't trim back to option 2 because that would be well within the cost. We would have to find out what the differences are between field 3, trying to get to it, of course I can't. Field 3 and field 2. So that's always still on the table, but at least now we're only dealing really with 2 documents or not.
Yeah, I would like 1, 2, and 3. Me too. I think.
Is that the way the rest of
the
the board feels then?
I'm fine with 1 and 3.
I'm fine with 1 and 3.
I think we should say 1, 2, and 3.
We're not deciding. I just want information. I
Right.
want for information.
Okay. So,
We'll prepare 1, 2, and 3, but at the end of that, then
Sure.
we need a little more direction because we can't. I want to make sure the board understands too that we can't keep vacillating between the 3, and I know that's not what anyone's trying to do. So we'll get you 1, 2, and 3 for the next one, and we'll try to narrow in any contingency costs, any soft costs, and also get one master list now from the architect that deals with overall priorities as we develop them so that you have that. It's pretty much, those are all going to be the same for each option. It's really the difference on the external incidental costs.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, just some of the things that I would like in the next 2 weeks, if we could talk to some of the coaches just to see the difference of how they feel about 2 and 3 and what sports will go on there.
I do, just so that the board knows, I've been invited to the soccer program meeting because they wanted to have some discussion because there was a lot of information, and specifically it was between 1, 2, and 3, so I'll be able to hopefully give you some feedback because that's probably the most detrimental field, if anything, that we've talked about.
Right. And then there was one other thing. Oh, and then if we could have that breakdown of costs, because I know, like to add that, I mean, at one point it was only $6 in addition.
Yeah, the
you know.
financials from Judy,
Right.
we'll have that. Let me ask the board, would it be better now, because we know that the interest rates are not 5%. Is it better now to get closer to the interest rate that we can assume for
Yes,
fiscal advice?
that'd be good.
Yeah, I think as close to, quote, real costs
Real
you
costs.
can get is going to be helpful.
Okay. Same exact with our numbers here and any projected extra costs, not just the the very, and please, I use this term lightly, the very liberal cost that was put there, we need to tighten up our soft costs so we truly know and also get the answer on the EPC. So that way you see the three costs, and then we can start putting together, here's option A without EPC, option B without EPC, and option C without EPC.
I have a question for the board. Remember when we were doing the budget last year, we had, you know, that kind of rotating line up and down, and this is what it would be if it was at, I don't know, 2 point whatever, and that we had the number, and I actually hated it initially, but then I got used to it. Would that kind of a system be helpful in the next meeting where we can say, okay, this is.
You kind of
I
have.
know, but it moves up and down, and, you know. Yeah. So kind of rework, upgrade this a bit more to that we could have this kind of running list and. Okay.
Yeah, I think,
It's kind of there, you're saying it's there? Okay.
yeah, it's this list right here.
Okay.
This is by priority, the colored list, and then
But
there's a
that doesn't
running total.
include the soft cost.
That does not include the soft costs,
Okay,
so.
so whatever that amount is, we'd have to.
Well, what I would do is once they give me the total on soft costs, I'd create a column and multiply each line by that soft
Okay.
cost.
Great.
I don't think we should be too, you know, when I think of the insurance rates, I mean, 5% right now is very high, but by the time this actually goes out, we're actually issuing bonds, it might go up from the whatever 0.9 or 1% that it is right now. So I don't think we can go all the way down to the present level, just in case.
I think
if
we
the
have to pick a
economy is
midpoint.
improving, then it might be actually up higher. So
You know what the 5% is, what I'll do is I'll calculate it based on the current numbers, and then at least you'll have a range as to what the impact would be. So you can have both numbers.
We got it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I know. Well, are we done with our discussions with this? And I would think, you know, on the 19th, we definitely, I think, need to come up with some decisions. And I was going to put off, you know, what Mike had brought up, you know, till the end and kind of get this through, but we'll talk more about that. The one comment I just wanted to make with the bond, as far as putting it up separately, I mean, we've never really separated things out before. It'd be like, almost like, you know, people may ask them, why aren't we separating out the technology part of it or this part of it? So that's why I would almost, you know, say it should all be together, but I
You could
just
also
wanted
consider
to.
separating out the technology. I mean, no one
Yeah.
wants 3 bonds up
No,
there, but
no,
we
that's what I
haven't, you know.
mean. You don't want
Yeah,
3, you don't
but
want
we haven't
the
decided that
this,
yet,
this,
so.
and this. No, but I know other people, you know, everybody
we do
else
the
talked
buses,
about it,
We do
and-
the buses separately.
but the buses are separate.
Well, but that's because they are bonded versus a regular
Right,
operating
no, I
budget.
understand, it's a difference.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if anybody else wanted to talk about Mike's thing or wait until the 19th. We're good?
It's a good thing to think about. I
Yeah.
think that gives the board time to.
I didn't hear what you just said. Something, I heard
Just,
the 19th,
well,
but-
if anybody else wanted to talk about what Mike had brought up about the bond. I mean, I was thinking more of that doing on the 19th, but.
Yeah,
if-
I would agree. with that.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. I lost my agenda.
Student Senate, you want to go back?
Yeah, I will. Jamie, we'll go back to Student Senate report.
I think it's been a little while since I last spoke with you, but we had our Mr. Bethlehem contest a few weeks back, and I would like to report that it was a big success. We had almost 300 students show up to the event, and it was a really good. There was a lot of school unity, I felt, and I think people were really excited about it, and it was a positive event, which was something, you know, we wanted to make sure that it had a positive focus. So Mr. Landry also agreed with us and thinks that it's something that could continue in the future. Mr. Joey Giacconi is the Mr. Bethlehem for 2012. So also we're doing a holiday food drive with all of the homerooms with the counseling center. So we've been going into every homeroom. We did the D-wing this past 2 days, but we're just encouraging students to come in, and that's another positive thing. So we're hoping by the end of next week, each homeroom will have a box filled for a family. And also, many of the seniors attended the Student Senate Conference that was sponsored by SEPCU for all the schools in the Capital District. So we got a lot of great ideas from that. And we're looking to possibly do another fundraiser in the winter, maybe a combination between that and our snowball dance, which we do every year to help increase our funds. So we're on a positive note, and now we're starting to look for our next big event that we can help. And also another way that we can look to benefit the community. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I found it.
I have a question
Yes.
for her. Jamie?
Jamie.
I have a quick question. Any sense of how students are doing this time of the year, just in terms of stress or happiness or getting ready for the holidays or exam, anything, any thoughts?
I mean, I maybe it's my personal experience because it's my senior year, but I feel that there's a really positive spirit in the school, and I think that it's just everything has gone along really smoothly, and I think that's the general feel, is that I don't think students are walking around the halls jumping for joy, but just everyone seems very calm, steady. I think that, obviously this week there has been a little bit of there's just a feeling in the air, and I think everyone is really just sympathetic and trying to do whatever they can to reach out to the other schools. I know a lot of our students went and attended the candle lighting last night. So, but I think within our own school, I just have felt a very positive feeling this year. I think that most students are feeling very content. I know that there is talk about the midterm schedule, and I think the general feeling with that is that students are happier with how it is back this year, and so I think that's another positive thing. And so the year for me has flown by, and I think that's the general feel among students.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Enjoy
Thanks.
your holiday. Thank you.
You too. Okay. Item 7, finance. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following finance actions, items A through D. Is there a motion?
I'd make a motion that we separate them out and vote on them individually, A through D.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
I'll move the treasurer's report.
Item A.
Sorry.
Okay, any discussion? Okay. And then item, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries. And then approve the execution of the contract to sell the property at 90 Adams Place. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, and then I think Judy can kind of explain that.
Yes. We have had the 90 Adams Street parcel listed with the broker for about a year and a half now. We had the property up for either purchase or lease. We put it out there with an asking price of $650, waiting to see what the market would show us to be the value. After some interest, we did get this offer from Schools Out for $475,000, which, based on the activity that we saw, seems to be a reasonable value for the property. There is, would you like me to touch on the next one as well?
Why don't
or
we?
you want to keep it
Yeah,
separate?
because he wanted to
Okay.
do it separate.
Okay.
So any other question on that, or?
Did you mention who's the person?
And Schools Out has presented that contract for sale, the offer.
Okay. Any other questions, or?
Would have been nice to get more, but obviously that's what the market will bear, so. And to keep it, I mean, it's not like there was a lot of interest in purchasing it.
There was
so-
limited interest.
So,
Okay.
it is what it is.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. Then item C, approve the mandatory reserve fund for debt service. Is there a motion?
So,
Second.
Okay, and then Judy, you can touch on that too, please.
Because there were improvements that were made to the building several years ago that were included in the previous bond, because there is still debt service outstanding on that, we are required under general municipal law to establish what's called a mandatory reserve fund. Essentially, it becomes a debt service reserve fund where the proceeds would need to be deposited to that fund to cover the future debt service costs. And then what that does is it provides you a funding source for that debt service over the subsequent years remaining on the bond.
Thanks. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. And then item D, the driver education program. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve Bell's Auto Driving School to operate our driver's education program from September 1, 2012 to June 30th, 2013. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. Item 8, professional personnel. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following instructional staff action items, A through B.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. And item 9, support personnel. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following support staff action items, A through F.
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. And correspondence for action is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following correspondence action, item A.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. And, yep,
Can I go back?
yep.
On the Bell's Driving School, if, one of the reasons that we decided to, we approved this last year to do the Bell's Driving School, one of the reasons was to increase the number of kids that could participate in that program. So I guess I would like to know how many were increased, and I think we should let the public know how many more can participate in the program now with this system as opposed to the other, where we did it all in-house.
Okay.
It was also, just to clarify, it was also
Yes.
done because we were having a lot of problems with the cars, and it would have
Right.
been a pretty big budget impact to actually
Right, to have
purchase
the
new
fleet,
vehicles.
yes, that's why I said it was one of the reasons, but I do think it would be interesting to know, you know, how many were we able to increase on that? I think that we should know that.
Okay. You can get that for us?
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, item 11, recognition of visitors. That's not on the agenda. And future meetings is December 19th, January 2nd, January 16th. We don't have to vote on that, right? Okay, we no need to go into adjourn to executive session, so is there a meeting, motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Do you want to call them? We can't make it. Huh?
I asked my wife to text him, I don't know if she got a hold of him.
But they told me the kitchen would close at